I was the only one in my family with a steady job and no debt, and somehow I was still the least appreciated. I've heard the phrase, "You're so lucky you don't have kids," more times than I can count. Usually from my mom, sometimes from my aunts, and always in that same passive-aggressive tone, like my personal freedom was a failure dressed as freedom. Like my apartment, my career, my quiet weekends with books and takeout were just consolation prizes for being left behind. "You don't have to worry about anyone but yourself," Mom would say. "You can just come and go as you please. That must be nice." But she never said it kindly. It was never admiration. It was a dig, wrapped in a ribbon of envy. What she meant was, you don't have to give like I gave. You don't have to sacrifice like I sacrificed. And maybe she was right, but she never saw what I gave, or what I lost. I'm 33, single, no kids, no major debt, no partner depending on me. I work in data analytics and live in a one-bedroom apartment in Philly with a dog named Tito who thinks he's a cat. I'm not flashy, not loud, not reckless. I save, I plan, I show up. I've always shown up. For everyone, especially my family. I'm the oldest of two. My younger brother Ryan is 31 and somehow still figuring things out. He's had at least 6 different jobs in the past 10 years. He moves in and out of relationships like it's a hobby. Every Christmas, there's a new girl at dinner and a new complaint about how the world just isn't built for guys like me. I used to defend him. Now I just listen. Because what's the point? In my family, Ryan is the one who needs help. And I'm the one who's fine. Which means whatever I give doesn't count. Because it's expected. I moved out at 18, paid my own tuition, took 3 part-time jobs in college, never asked for a cent. I remember bringing home my first bonus check from a consulting contract and offering to take my parents out for dinner. Mom said, "Oh, don't waste your money on us. Save it for when you have a family." I replied, "You are my family." She rolled her eyes. "We don't need fancy things, Vanessa. That's for people who don't know how to be content." Content. That word stayed with me. I was raised to believe that being content meant shrinking, dimming, saying thank you, even when no one gave you anything. When I was 27, my dad lost his job. He was laid off after 20-plus years working for a mid-sized construction firm. He took it hard. He stopped shaving, stopped coming out of his room, started watching old war movies on loop. Ryan had just crashed his 3rd car and was living back home temporarily. Mom called me in tears one night. "If we can't figure something out, we might lose the house." I didn't think twice. I asked for the account details, called the bank, and arranged a direct monthly transfer. I told them to apply it toward the 2nd mortgage, the one they had taken out to help Ryan with credit card debt, and ironically, that 3rd car. Every month, I sent $1,200. Quietly. Automatically. For 6 years. And I never brought it up, because if I did, it would turn into a fight. Or worse, another accusation of throwing it in their faces. In my family, loyalty means silence. You help, you smile, and you never say, "This hurts me." You do it because you're the stable one, the lucky one, the unmarried, unburdened, ungrateful one. Every Sunday, I'd go home for dinner with bags of groceries. Mom would say, "You know, if you had kids, you wouldn't have the time for all this." As if showing up was a luxury. As if kindness came easy when you didn't have a ring on your finger. And every time she said it, I'd just smile. But deep down, a little piece of me would tighten, not out of anger. Out of the quiet realization that no matter how much I gave, it would never be seen. Because in their eyes, I was just the girl who didn't need anything. The one with the easy life. The one who was lucky to be single. I found out about the 2nd mortgage by accident. It was a Sunday right after dinner. Dad was washing dishes, something he only started doing after his layoff, and Mom was sitting at the table with a stack of unopened mail beside her, sighing every few minutes like it was an Olympic sport. I offered to help sort the envelopes. She waved me off. "Just more bank junk," she said, pushing a letter with a bold red stamp to the bottom of the pile. Curiosity got the better of me. When she went upstairs to check on Ryan, who was still somehow living at home at 30, I pulled that letter out and opened it. It wasn't junk. It was a delinquency notice from their mortgage lender. Apparently, they had taken out a 2nd mortgage on the house 5 years prior, and they were behind, again. I felt the blood drain from my face. How? Why? Why didn't anyone tell me? I drove home that night in silence, the letter stuffed in my coat pocket like a secret I never asked to carry. The next day, I called the bank. I used my old high school address and my dad's name as verification. The woman on the line sounded tired, but polite. Yes, there's a secondary loan on the property, currently delinquent by 2 months, payments of $1,221.45 due monthly. 2 months. That meant they'd missed nearly $2,500 in payments. I remember staring at the wall in my apartment, Tito curled at my feet and thinking, they're drowning. And they're pretending it's just rain. I didn't confront them. I didn't demand explanations. I just started paying. Every 5th of the month for the next 6 years, that exact amount left my account. No reminders, no thank yous, no acknowledgements that I was the reason they kept their home. And somehow I convinced myself that was okay, because what mattered was that they were safe, that they could sleep, that Mom could keep pretending things were fine, that Ryan didn't end up back on my couch for the 3rd time. I told myself it wasn't about recognition, it was about duty, about love. But love without acknowledgement is a slow kind of self-erasure, and it starts with silence. During those 6 years, things didn't get better, they just got quieter. Mom went back to work part-time at the library. Dad picked up a maintenance job at the local golf course. Ryan tried launching a podcast about crypto freedom that lasted 4 episodes. The house stayed warm, the lights stayed on, and no one ever mentioned how. Every time I visited, I saw the envelope pile. Neater now, but still heavy. I brought groceries, paid for Dad's new glasses, fixed Ryan's car's battery once without telling him it was me. And the one time I made a comment about money, just lightly. If you ever need help with the house again, let me know. Mom snapped. We've been managing just fine, Vanessa. Don't act like we're your charity case. I apologized, like I always did. Looking back, I think they knew. Maybe not the exact numbers. But they knew someone was keeping the water from their necks, and they wanted to believe it was a miracle, not their daughter. Because if it was me, it meant they'd have to face something harder than debt. It meant they'd have to say thank you, and sorry. And maybe admit that the selfish, unmarried daughter was the one holding the entire house together. So I let them believe the lie, and every month I paid, until the day they decided that the house I'd been saving didn't belong to me. It was a Sunday. Of course it was. We had just finished dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, canned corn, the way Mom always made it. Ryan was on his 2nd beer, half listening to Dad ramble about fantasy football stats. I was rinsing dishes, letting the warm water ground me, trying not to feel invisible in my own childhood kitchen. Then I heard it. Well, once Ryan gets married, we're thinking of just signing the house over to him, Mom said casually, like it was a throwaway comment. Like she was talking about handing down an old sofa. I turned slowly. Ryan leaned back in his chair, smug grin on his face. Yeah, it'll be good to finally have a place. Ashley wants to start planning a nursery. I blinked. I didn't know you were engaged. He shrugged. Not officially, but it's happening. I dried my hands with the dish towel, heart hammering harder than it should have been. So you're giving him the house? I asked, carefully, evenly. Mom looked at me, annoyed, like I'd just interrupted a pleasant daydream. It makes sense. He's starting a family. You have your own place. I have a 1-bedroom apartment I paid for myself, I said, trying not to let my voice crack. That house? I've been covering the 2nd mortgage on it for 6 years. The silence was instant, total. Ryan stopped chewing. Dad cleared his throat, but didn't look at me. Mom narrowed her eyes. What are you talking about? I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I've been paying $1,221.45 every month since I found out you were behind. I never said anything because I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but now you're just giving the house away? Her face twisted. Not with guilt. With anger. That's not something to brag about, Vanessa. If you really did it from the heart, you wouldn't throw it in our faces now. Ryan muttered, God, why do you always have to make everything about you? I felt something in me snap. A string that had been stretched for years, holding up the illusion that keeping quiet made me good. Because you've all built a fantasy world where I don't exist unless you need me. I looked directly at my mom. I kept you in that house, I saved it from foreclosure, and you never once said thank you. You didn't even ask how the bills were being paid. You just assumed someone else, someone invisible, was handling it. She stood up, crossing her arms. Maybe we didn't ask because we didn't want your charity. I stared at her, at my father, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. At Ryan, now sipping his beer like this conversation bored him. You don't want my charity, I said slowly, but you're happy to hand my sacrifice to someone who's never done a damn thing for this family. That did it. Mom exploded. Get over yourself. You've always acted like you were better than us. Like we owed you something just because you got a fancy job and no kids. Well, guess what, Vanessa? You're not the only one who matters. She was shouting now. If you're so miserable being part of this family, maybe you don't belong here at all. And then the words I'd heard before, but never like this. If you're going to keep score, get out and don't come back. For a second, I froze, waiting. Waiting for someone, anyone, to stop her. To say, she didn't mean that. To say, Vanessa's done more than all of us combined. But they didn't. Dad stayed seated. Ryan reached for more potatoes. So I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove straight home. When I got there, I logged into my bank's online portal, went to scheduled payments, clicked cancel recurring transfer, then deleted the account from my saved payees. It was done. No more silent giving. No more holding up a house full of people who only noticed me when I stopped serving them. That night, I slept with a strange kind of peace. Not the kind that comes from being loved. The kind that comes from finally choosing yourself. It took exactly 42 days after I canceled the payments for the first text to come. From Dad, of course. "Day, kiddo. Just wondering if there was a glitch with the bank? We got a notice from the mortgage company." I stared at the message. Blinked once, twice. Put the phone down. No follow-up. No call. No how are you. Just a soft tap on the glass of obligation. I didn't reply. 3 days later, Mom broke the silence. "Is this your way of punishing us? You just left us in the lurch like this? Seriously, Vanessa?" Still no please, no recognition. Just blame. Just that old familiar script, the one where I was the unreasonable one for setting a boundary. I didn't reply to her either. The next week, I received a certified letter from the mortgage lender, one that had clearly also been sent to my parents' address. The words "Notice of Default" were printed in bold across the top. They were now 90 days delinquent. I imagined Mom pacing the living room holding that paper like it was soaked in acid. Dad probably silent, shoulders slumped. Ryan? God, I didn't even know. Probably annoyed he might have to get a real job. I sat at my kitchen table and felt, not satisfaction, not revenge, just emptiness. Like watching a storm you predicted hit a coastline you warned people to evacuate from. 2 weeks later, Ryan called, first time in over 6 months. "Hey, look, I know things got a little heated," he began. I didn't say anything. He kept going. "The house situation. It's bad. They're threatening foreclosure unless we pay the arrears." "We?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, in the most casual voice I've ever heard him use, "I was wondering if you could just help out. One last time. I mean, you've already done it for years, right? Just until I can figure something out with Ashley." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't even bitter. Just disbelieving. "Ryan," I said, "did you ever say thank you?" "What?" "For any of it. For the $85,000 I paid, for keeping that house intact while you floated from scheme to scheme, for letting Mom believe it was magic so she wouldn't have to admit her son was draining her dry." Another pause. "Then, are you serious right now? You want me to thank you when you bailed and let them suffer?" I hung up, blocked his number. Then I went to the mirror and stared at myself for a long time. Not because I doubted what I'd done, but because I realized this was who I had always been in their eyes. Not a daughter. Not a person. Just a lifeline. A week later, Dad came to my apartment. I didn't open the door at first, just stared at him through the peephole. This man who taught me how to ride a bike, how to do long division, how to fold a fitted sheet. He looked smaller, like someone who had finally realized the dam was breaking and there was no one left to plug the holes. I let him in. We sat on the couch. Tito curled beside me like a buffer zone. He said, "I didn't know the house was still under your name in the bank system. The bank said you were the one who stopped the payments." I nodded. "Because I was the one who started them." He looked down. "Your mother? She's still upset. But I think she didn't know how to deal with being helped by you." I said nothing. He added softly, we might lose the house. I looked at him for a long time, then said, maybe you will. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked, do you think I wanted this? To feel like the only way I could be loved was by giving? He didn't answer, so I kept going. I didn't need a parade. I didn't even need praise. I just wanted to matter. But the second I said enough, you all acted like I broke something. He finally met my eyes. Vanessa, you did more than we ever asked. And that was it. That was the closest thing I would ever get to an apology. Not from Mom, not from Ryan, but from the man who, for all his silence, finally said something true. I nodded, then walked him to the door. And when he left, I sat, in the quiet, heart steady, no tears this time. Because I had learned something. Some people only love you when you're useful. And the moment you stop saving them, they act like you're the one who let them drown. The foreclosure went through 3 months later. There were no dramatic confrontations, no final phone calls, no apologies left in voicemails, just silence. And then a for sale sign on the lawn of the house I once called home. A neighbor sent me a picture of it. Ryan and Ashley had moved into a rented duplex on the other side of town. My parents were staying with my aunt for a while, according to Dad's last text. And me? I was still in my same one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by plants, spreadsheets, and a dog who liked classical piano and hated thunderstorms. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone but myself. I didn't swoop in to rescue them this time. Because what they needed wasn't a rescue. They needed accountability. They needed to understand that help is not the same as entitlement. That love doesn't mean erasing yourself just to keep the peace. I used to think family meant absorbing every blow without flinching. Now I think it means learning when to stop bleeding for people who call your wounds drama. A few months after the house was sold, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter from Mom. The envelope had no return address. The handwriting was her usual half cursive, half pride. It started with, I don't know what to say to you anymore. And ended with, you embarrassed us. But I guess you made your point. No thank you. No I'm sorry. Just guilt and bruised ego dressed up as reflection. I folded the letter in half, put it in a drawer. Not out of bitterness, just closure. She had said everything I needed to hear, and nothing I needed to feel. People ask me now, when I tell them the short version over drinks or at therapy or during long walks on podcasts, do you ever wish you just stayed quiet? Let them give him the house? Kept the peace? And I smile, not because I don't still ache sometimes, but because I know the truth. Silence isn't peace. Self-erasure isn't love. And giving more than you're asked doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. I used to pay that mortgage like it was penance, like I had to earn my space in the family by sacrificing silently. Now, I pay for things that feed me. Books, travel, a therapy membership, a future I actually want to live in. Last month, I bought a small fixer-upper in the Catskills. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a crooked porch swing, a fig tree that's stubbornly trying to grow in the wrong soil. It's mine. No one's name is on the deed but mine. When the realtor handed me the keys, she said, congratulations, first-time buyer? I almost said yes, but then I remembered. I've bought a house before. I just didn't get to keep it. And now, I don't need a house to prove I'm worthy. I needed to stop handing them over to people who never asked how I paid for them. I still love my family, but now I love them from a distance that doesn't cost me my peace. I send birthday cards. Sometimes. I answer calls when I feel strong enough. I give what I can, but never what I must betray myself to give, because I didn't walk away from them out of cruelty. I walked away so I wouldn't have to keep walking away from myself. And that, more than a title deed or approval or even a thank you, that is what freedom looks like. That is what reclaiming your life feels like. Some mornings now I sit on the porch of my little Catskills home with a cup of coffee and listen to the wind move through the trees. It's quieter here than anywhere I've ever lived. No sirens, no passive-aggressive phone calls, no sense that I'm on call for someone else's life. Just me. Just stillness. Sometimes I wonder, if I had said something earlier, if I had spoken up years ago, before the resentment hardened, would it have changed anything? Would they have seen me not as a bank account with a face, but as a daughter with boundaries? I don't think so. Because some families don't change when you give more. They only change when you stop. There are people in the world who can love without taking. And when you find them, friends, chosen family, even strangers, you realize how broken your definition of love used to be. That love doesn't require proof through suffering. That loyalty doesn't mean silence. That being the strong one doesn't mean you never break. It just means you got tired of explaining why you did. I used to think I was asking too much from my family. Now I realize I wasn't asking to be loved more. I was asking to be loved fairly. And when that proved too heavy for them, I set it down. I walked away, and I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing the ones that only held them up. They still don't understand why I left. Why I didn't come back when the house crumbled. But I know. And that's enough, because for the first time in my life, I don't feel like a traitor for choosing myself. I feel like someone who finally stepped out of the shadows and into the home I built. Not with guilt, not with debt, not with silence, but with clarity and peace. The real inheritance was never the house. It was the moment I learned to stop giving everything away just to be allowed inside. And now, I belong wholly to myself. Nubat mun tukate.